Sometimes when you and I reach the place that we call impossible, the place where we think we are not going to get beyond this is it. It's not the end of everything, it's just the beginning of your next phase of training. Hi, this is Barry Phillips with 10-Minute Torah, day number 3, a Torah portion, Shemot. Again, it's the story of the people who are called by these names or their descendants. So this is the story of Am Israel. Key figure at this point is Moshe, more commonly called Moses, Hebrew Moshe. And in chapter number 2, we find that he has an appreciation of a sentimental heart toward a desire to deliver his people, the Hebrews who are being enslaved. So in chapter number 2, we read beginning with verse number 11, and in those days it came to be when Moshe was grown, that he went out to his brothers and looked at their burdens, and he saw a Mitzrayim, an Egyptian, striking a Hebrew, one of his brothers. So he turned this way and that way, and when he saw no one, he struck the Mitzrayim and hid him in the sand. Now he's acting as a deliverer. He's seen all he can see and stand. He's got to do something. He's got to try to help. Maybe he thinks himself the Caped Crusader in behalf of Israel. So he goes out, it says in verse 13, the next day. Maybe there's some other good that I can do, he would think. And he set up the second day and saw 2 Hebrew men fighting. And he said to the one who did the wrong, why do you strike your neighbor? And he said, who made you a head and a judge over us? 2 Hebrews fighting. Now, who do you suppose they are? By that question, I'm not asking what were their names in particular, who are these 2 individuals, but who do they represent? Well, the siblings of Israel often fought one another. The story continues on in the book of Yehoshua or Joshua and Shoftim or Judges. And the history is written there of oftentimes tribes fighting one another, but more often than not, the 2 that you see in conflict has already been shown between Joseph and Yehuda, or as they later are called, the house of Yehuda, the tribes to the south, and the house of Ephraim, or the house of Israel, located in the north. So this Civil War thing here in the United States, north and south, it's not the first time that that's happened. Those roots go back a long, long ways. That's another story, another time. Now, we see this conflict between 2 Hebrews. And Moshe wants to intervene. Moshe is symbolic of a couple of things here, at least. Number one, he is the deliverer. He doesn't know that yet. He's trying to be, but it's not going to go according to his plans, and things are going to fall apart. He's going to have to be remade before he can become a deliverer. We also see that Moshe is symbolic of the Torah, the first 5 books, the commands of Yah. Now, again, he doesn't know that at this point, but it's symbolically, that's who he is to become, known as Moshe, the Torah giver. And so one of these 2 warring individuals or tribes or symbolic groups of people is asking, who made you to be a ruler and a law over us? You can look at either one of these 2 tribes or these two houses and see where they would ask that. The house of Israel in particular, Ephraim, the 10 tribes to the north who have been scattered throughout the world and in large part have ended up here in America for whatever reasons and however Yah has designed that. But many of us that are being drawn back to this Torah and being drawn back to the Hebraic focus of things, it could be that there's something Hebraic in our DNA, but it's at least in our spiritual DNA. It is, as Yeshua said, who has ears to hear, let him hear what the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, is saying. The prophet Ezekiel or Yehezkel says that the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, is going to inscribe this word on our heart. So when we have invited the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, to come and live within us, to operate in its giftings and its abilities within us, the majority of that work is not so much power gifts and tongues and prophecy and interpretations and so forth. It's the inscribing of the Torah's commands upon who we are. That being understood, it has been long held generationally and doctrinally over those generations that the writings of Moshe are no longer to be applied. There are things that have been rejected, and somehow Yeshua so fulfilled them that we're no longer required to even look at them. That's not exactly so. A quick look at Matthew chapter 5 and verse 17 will give you an understanding, and 17 and following. So we understand then that we need to apply his word. Yochanan, John chapter number 14 says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. The commandments of Yeshua and the commandments of the Father are one and the same. Yeshua only came speaking what the Father would say. But the house of Israel, you and I, the denominations, the structures of religion that we came out of, would look at Moshe the Torah giver and say, who made you to be an authority over us? The house of Yehuda, although they and oftentimes they are trying to apply the Torah, oftentimes they go beyond the legitimacy of the Torah, and we're observing now rabbinical decrees and commands and institutions, and it's become a religious thing. Not throwing stones at anybody here. It's just a reality of both houses have looked at Moshe and said, who called you to rule over us? The result of that is then that Moshe flees. If you're not willing to study his Torah, once it comes to you to a realization that this word is legit, that it has something to say to me, that this as a description of how the community of believers are to walk together, believe together, worship together, that all truth is originally stated in the Torah, then it's amplified and expanded on in the other books as they continue. When we look at the Torah and realize that this is the Father's heart, this is what he wants for us, this is how he wants us to live, and then we reject that, where else do we go? What else do we have? We're left then with the institutions of man, the doctrines of man, the philosophies of man proclaimed as truth. They may be good, they may be well-intentioned, but if they're not based on the Torah, they're not true. It doesn't matter how many people flock to a building to hear the philosophy or the doctrine. It doesn't matter what style that is presented in and how amiable, how good intentioned, how charismatic the personality is that's proclaiming it. The word does not pass away. And when we look at the word and say, who made you to be an authority over me? Then we become a word unto ourselves. We do the best we can with what we say that we believe. The issue with that is that when we stand before our judge and our king, he is not going to look at us and ask, how did you live according to your best understanding or to your preferences? But rather, he's going to pull out the word, and we're going to be judged by the word. Don't reject him. Get back to the Torah with simplicity and sincerity of heart, and let's do this thing right. Thank you so much for liking, for hitting the like button, for subscribing if you haven't done so. Hitting the like button just pushes our video up to the top and enables others to see it. I appreciate your cooperation and your help with that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow. Until then, shalom.